let's start with Judas and the Black Messiah. Drew, what's that all about?
Well, an important thing to know about Judas and the Black Messiah is in whose view Daniel Kaluuya's Fred Hampton, leader of the Illinois branch of the Black Panther Party in the mid-1960s, was messianic, and it's not the members of his party. No, that's the view of the noted, sane, rational and entirely colourblind J. Edgar Hoover, whose typical, calm, rational and totally not frothing at the brain reasoning went something along the lines of, these uppity blacks will murder us in our beds and destroy our fine white country. Hoover, played here by Martin Sheen in facial prosthetics for some reason. Sheen looks perhaps a little like the FBI's douche canoe in chief, but mostly looks like Martin Sheen with a silly nose. Something that's particularly weird when every other actor playing a real character has gone for hair is quite like them. But anyway, yes, Hoover has convinced himself that the Black Panther Party is the greatest domestic threat to the USA, and to just look at them trying to educate and motivate a politically suppressed populace and also feed hungry children, the bastards, and wants them stopped. Key to this plan are informants, and one of these, the Judas of the title, is Lakeith Stanfield's Bill O'Neill, a young man caught impersonating an FBI agent as a ruse to steal a car. Real FBI agent Roy Mitchell, Jesse Plemons, gives O'Neill two choices: go undercover as an informant in the Black Panther Party, or go to prison. Not seeing this as much of a choice, O'Neill infiltrates the party, eventually rising to head of security for the Illinois chapter, putting him in close, trusted proximity to Hampton, something which will lead to Hampton's murder, though of course they claimed otherwise, by the Chicago police and the FBI. This being based on history, the story is not the hook here, but the personalities, principally Fred Hampton. The fiery young communist was a mere 21 years old when he was definitely not assassinated by the state. But in Kaluuya's hands, and those of writers Shaka King and Will Berson, he seems wise beyond those years. And not just because Kaluuya is 32. I'm going to criticise that from one direction. I need to be consistent and do it from the other. He's too old. Thankfully, this goes far beyond speeches, which are there, of course, because films love speeches. Well, understandably so. But also in quieter moments, like those between Hampton and his fiancée, Deborah, Dominique Fishback. The film leavens Hampton's kill the pigs rhetoric with scenes of him as a gentle, shy and poetic soul. And rather than seeming dissonant, this paints a portrait of a believable, complex and perhaps conflicted character. Less successfully portrayed is the other half of the film's title, as I never quite bought Lakeith Stanfield in his role. Certainly his unease in many situations is well conveyed by Stanfield's expressive face and occasionally a suggested inner turmoil, but for the most part he so convincingly looks shifty, ill at ease and ready to flee that, for all his quick-wittedness and talking his way out of dangerous situations, it's actually very hard to believe any character in the film would be okay with him being in charge of security and Hampton's personal safety. We should totally put the dodgy-looking guy who always looks like he's hiding something in charge of security, right? The bigger problem, though, is that Bill O'Neill, in this film at least, is a cipher. And that's an issue with the script. We never get to know what he really thinks or believes, whether Hampton's polemic and rhetoric have any effect on him, whether he acted through fear, self-interest, or something else. And script deficiencies also make it hard to buy O'Neill as being close enough to, or trusted enough by Hampton to make the Judas reference really work. The script also has a sufficiency of scenes within the FBI, almost all of which could have been cut to the film's benefit, especially the one in which the film stops dead to allow Hoover to be extra racist. For all that, Judas and the Black Messiah is still quite a compelling watch, and worth viewing for Kaluuya alone, if nothing else. And it's also a much more successful look at 1960s civil rights and freedom of speech movement in Chicago than last year's The Trial of the Chicago 7.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I maybe liked it a bit more than you did, but that's probably because I didn't need to write up any notes and analyse it in any particular detail.
I found myself liking it a bit less when I started writing it. To be honest, like Lakeith Stanfield's not that great, and the more I wrote about it, the less I liked his performance in it. And that was my bigger problem. But sorry, I have interrupted you.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that's like bowdlerising. He needs to be shifty because the role requires him to be shifty, so that's why he looks shifty. I can kind of see where that's coming from. But I was impressed by this film mainly because it's the Daniel Kaluuya show, and he's really, really, really good in this film. And the supporting acts, I think, more or less carry their weight. Guys like Jesse Plemons and Martin Sheen's an odd one. I don't know what they were playing at with that one. That seemed weird. It's like, I don't know quite what the art direction for that was. Didn't seem particularly necessary. We're used to the concept of actors. I don't. Yeah,
and it's the only person in the film. That's the weird thing. Like, you look at Lakeith Stanfield, and he's got largely the same facial hair as Bill O'Neill, but his facial hair's not that distinctive. Unless you've got like a ZZ Top beard or something like that, and Daniel Kaluuya looks exactly like Daniel Kaluuya. And his girlfriend has kind of vaguely the same hair, but it's also hair that like Aretha Franklin had in that era. It wasn't particularly distinctive. So why does Martin Sheen have all the makeup on?
Yeah, and I mean, it's okay. I understand it's a film. I know you've not got the actual people into. A very peculiar choice and somewhat distracting. Which is a bit of a shame because the rest of the film, certainly the central story is, I don't know, it's one of the things, it's important to know that this happened, I think, particularly in America. The problem is that it's not like it's some, like, hidden bit of history that no one knows about, and it's not something that's completely been solved and we need to just remember that it happened in the past to prevent it from going on currently. As you will notice by any number of headlines across America, this kind of thing is still happening daily, and it almost feels a little bit depressing because basically it's just reminding you of the much worse actual things that are happening right now and still haven't been solved, and that's probably the biggest downer of the whole experience. The kind of reminding you that this isn't just some real life event that happened in the dim and distant past that we've all learned and moved on from, but no, it's something that is still sadly more or less happening now, depending on how you want to frame it. But yes, its relevance to a modern day audience is sadly all too depressingly real, and for that reason alone, it's certainly worth a look in. And frankly, the fact that it's such a powerhouse performance by Kaluuya gives it a bonus edge to it. Yes, it's an enjoyable film to watch. It's certainly really engaging, really captivating watch, and a tremendous central performance. So can't say much fairer than that. Certainly recommended from this end of the podcast spectrum. Yeah,
I wanted to be something a bit more. I think balance is probably what I want from it, because Bill O'Neill, he's barely a character.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think Lakeith Stanfield's bad in it, but he's not great either. And I really don't think the issue's him. I think there's so little in the script for that character. There's so little for him to work with.
I think the problem with the framing of the film is they've thought of a great idea for a title, and it's a great title.
Yeah.
But it's actually not the most interesting thing about the film. I mean, basically the interesting thing about the film is Fred Hampton. It should be called Fred Hampton.
Yes.
He was killed by the FBI. This was a bad thing. Fred Hampton is clearly by far and away the most interesting thing that happened in this film. He's all the interesting things are about him, and O'Neill's the character just doesn't have enough weight to really warrant being the other part of a two-hander. He's by far and away the least interesting aspect of the film, which is sad because he's focused on it a lot, and I don't think it's the actor's fault. It's just an underwritten role, and I don't know how. I don't know if I want it to be more written. I don't know how far in the way that would deviate from reality, but I mean, it's just not the most interesting thing to focus about in this time frame. So,
see, I think there must be something interesting in reality, because I mean, I haven't looked much into Bill O'Neill, but the way the little interview clips of the real guy are added to the film, it kind of feels like this guy's a pariah, and probably rightly so, but the fact they even used those real interviews, and that's a reasonably well-known, the best I can gather, so that's a reasonably well-known interview, it's Eyes on the Prize 2, the programme's called. And so it suggests to me that there is something interesting in there.
I mean, particularly after he killed himself the night after that interview went out, or I believe that was the case. Plainly something there.
Yeah, so we've got a tortured soul, and like that could be really interesting to see, like, whether he just just felt like with the pressure coming from Roy Mitchell, who for some reason the real Bill O'Neill claimed he looked up to. Who knows? But whether there was a lot of pressure coming from him and he just couldn't do anything, or I mean, maybe he just didn't like Fred Hampton or didn't like his politics or something, you know, or maybe he did but had to hide. And like, there's so many interesting things. There's some questions that could be asked, and the film doesn't really seem interested in doing any of them. It's like, here's this guy who's going to betray him, but we'll base everything on the interesting guy who's going to be betrayed, but the betrayer should be just as interesting as well. But again, as you said, Scott, it's like, yeah, if you're going to do that though and not actually have Judas be important, why is it the first name in the title?
Yeah.
Why not just call it the Black Messiah or something? Fred Hampton was not the first person to whom that actual name, or at least the sense of that name, was applied by that ass hat Hoover. But yeah, why call it that when like the Judas part of it is considerably less than half, despite seemingly having top billing?
Yeah.
It seems strange to me. So yeah, as I said, it's absolutely worth watching for Daniel Kaluuya's performance alone. He's fantastic. It just, the lack of balance in the way the characters play out, it bothers me quite a lot. I find it a frustration. Yeah,
I think you're right. There's probably a lot of internal life going along inside the Judas's character that I guess just never came out. I think he was like very guarded about everything, probably rightly so, and just never really gave a lot of insight to that during his life. I mean, that interview apparently was the kind of the closest he got to unburdening himself, and it wasn't all that explicative of what he was thinking at the time or anything like that. So whether they just didn't want to put words into the mouth, I don't know, out of respect or whatever. Maybe some amount of dramatisation in that would not have gone amiss. It might have made a bit of sense, at least dramatically. Whether or not it would apply true to reality, I'm not sure. But yeah, certainly in terms of it being a dramatic work of art, it underplays it for reasons that I'm not entirely sure of, and it doesn't quite serve the purpose of the film as a dramatic work, if not a kind of more documentarian thing.
Yeah, and again, I'm just left with the question of why Martin Sheen had that makeup.
Yes.
No, I think maybe it's because I largely think it's been forgotten now, and I hope so, because it's appalling. There's a film from almost 2 decades ago now called The Hours, in which Nicole Kidman got an Oscar because of her prosthetic nose. Well, I assume it's that because everything else about the film, especially performance, is appalling. So maybe Martin Sheen was hoping he could get a wee supporting actor Oscar nod for his prosthetic nose.
Yes.
So I'm pinning my reasoning on, because nothing else makes a lick of sense. Yeah, and for such a minor role as well. Tell me he's called J. Edgar Hoover, I'll understand who that is. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, Hoover doesn't need to be in the film at all, which is the strangest part of it.
Yeah. And he did seem to be playing Hoover in exactly the same way that he played his role in Mass Effect. It's exactly the same vocal intonations. I don't know if maybe he based the role of Mass Effect off J. Edgar Hoover. I don't know. But yes, very similar.
The elusive man, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in my mind earlier, actually, too. But that's a much more interesting role. He actually had anything to do in that game, but not this film, rather. Yeah, definitely interesting. And it's much better than... It's an obvious comparison, but because they're in the same city and the same era as well, but then the trial of Chicago 7, because, stuff that happened in this film, more happened.
Yes.
As opposed to being rewritten so Aaron Sorkin can have some of the dialogue he likes to write.
Yes.